Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Brought to you by the good people at Polyhymnia. That's Polyhymnia.
He's reading it off a piece of paper.
No, I'm not, you idiot. I got some crap recently for saying that polyhymnia is now the thing and then not explaining what polyhymnia even was or is. Polyhymnia is, for all intents and purposes, CACI, the Center for American Culture and Ideas. We're doing a DBA, doing business as Polyhymnia, and we chose Polyhymnia for a couple of pretty good reasons. First, it was a single word that was available as a URL. And if you think that's no small shakes, go try and find a single word that is available as a URL for the regular price, not for the tens of thousands of dollars the squatters think they're going to get. So there's that. But Polyhymnia herself was one of the Greek muses, and she was the Greek muse of sacred music and rhetoric. And what could be more in line with what we do, not you and me, but me and the group formerly known as CACI, what could capture what we do more than sacred music and rhetoric? That's exactly what we're looking at. Culture in all of its many forms. So there you go. And on that happy note, Ed, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
I was walking through the Denver airport the other day and somebody stopped me. One of our listeners, Jake Tibbetts. It was wonderful for someone who listens to stop and talk. It's the second time it's happened to me. The first time was due to my videos, which, I mean, that's understandable. You see the person on the video. I was very surprised that Jake recognized me, I guess from the pictures that accompany the splash screen on the podcast. But he did, and stopped. We had a nice little chat. Ran into each other by accident. Both of our flights were delayed. If either one of us hadn't been delayed, we would have missed each other. But that was a nice little respite in my otherwise hectic travels.
Were one of you on American and the other on United?
Oh my God, James. He was on United. I was on American. I'm convinced American doesn't actually want to fly.
Yes.
Every time
Yes.
I take those people, the flight is either seriously delayed or just completely canceled.
They love canceling flights.
Well, I'll tell you, I had a flight to go out to Kansas, and it was fly to, I guess I was going to Dallas-Fort Worth connection and then to a place in Kansas. And my flight is supposed to leave at like 6:30 in the morning from Dulles. 1:30 in the morning, I get a text from American saying, oh, your flight's canceled. I'm sure it doesn't matter to them. What they're concerned about is they had to cancel the flight. But for me as a passenger, it would be nice to know, I mean, did you just decide not to get up today or what's going on? But nonetheless, the flight's canceled. And by the time I woke up I guess I was getting up around 4 o'clock or so, a second text had come in saying, we've got you on a different flight. I thought, okay, that's all right. The different flight was not out of Dulles, it was out of Reagan, which is a pain in the butt to get to, but they had me on a flight, and the flight had 2 connections. So between that and my other connection, I now have 3 connections to get to where I'm going. But I figured, okay, it's going to get me where I'm going. It's going to be a hassle, but I'll do it.
What could possibly go wrong?
Let me tell you what could possibly go wrong. What possibly goes wrong is 20 minutes before I'm ready to leave the house to go to Reagan, I get another text, oh, your flight's been delayed 6 hours.
Well, there you go. Now you understand why I want, and still want, an Adventures with American Airlines segment on this very podcast.
It's astounding. I canceled the whole thing. I said, heck with American. I got a last-minute booking on United. United got me to where I need to go. And let me tell you the difference between United and American. Coming back, there was all those storms that were passing through the Midwest. I was supposed to connect through Denver. That's where I met Jake. They were having ground shutdowns at Denver, all this kind of thing. And our pilot, I'm in Kansas, on the plane, our United pilot says, okay, everybody, strap in. Denver's closed, but I'm going to taxi out to the end of the runway because if they open up, it'll be for a short window, and I want to get off the ground so that we're now in line to land at Denver. So this guy's proactively, and he got us there. I was delayed, but if it was American, I'd still be in Kansas.
That's exactly right. So what I'm going to do, Ant, is I'm going to send a link to this podcast to the president of American Airlines, warning him that his company is about to become a regular segment on this podcast.
And you might ask why I dealt with American at all. It turns out, because I fly to, how should I say, very rural places, and American seems to be the only airline that services, as near as I could tell, all of the state capitals, even though the capitals out in the Midwest are out in the middle of nowhere. But American serves them.
Well, I don't know how I can possibly hope to compete with anything you just said, but I came across an interesting thing on the Hill this morning. Here's the headline for you. Home sellers now outnumber buyers by 500,000.
Sellers outnumber buyers, yeah. Now, is that regional? I bet you it's driven largely by Washington area.
No, it's driven largely, it seems, by Florida.
Really? Huh.
6 of the top 10 buyers' markets are in Florida.
Wow.
Now, this is interesting, right? Because we've been hearing for quite a while now that people can't afford houses. They're just too expensive. The run-up in the prices has been ridiculous. And then you add to that the interest rate, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Well, if there are that many more sellers than buyers right now, prices are going to start coming down pretty significantly. As a matter of fact, the estimate here in this article is 1% by the end of the year.
Yep.
I suspect it might be more than that because I don't think the interest rates are going to come down anytime soon.
No, I don't think so either.
And as long as interest rates are high, it doesn't matter why the cost of housing is high. It just matters that the cost of housing is high. And, 7% rates people aren't going to buy houses. They can't afford them.
Yep.
That also means people can't sell houses. And that's going to turn into a real problem. What about when retirees want to sell their houses to live off the fat of the land?
Yep.
And they can't. So this is something that bears watching for the next year or two.
I think it's going to be more than the next year or two. With our population slowing down, there's going to be a whole bunch of houses. I mean, part of what drove up housing prices for generations was the fact that there were more and more Americans. I think there are twice as many Americans now as there were when I was a teenager. And of course, they need houses.
That's right. And there's an interesting thing going on here, right? Because if you buy an incredibly inexpensive house or a very, very expensive house, you're probably safe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You'll always be able to sell on either end of the distribution. It's those median homes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, everybody's going to hurt with those median homes.
Unless, as I see around here in the Washington area, in my mind, I call it a 1950s house, the one-level brick thing. Yeah. People here have no trouble selling those because developers, first thing to do is tear them down. They don't want the house. Yeah. They want the piece of property it's sitting on.
And a lot of times when I lived in D.C., when I was looking for houses, and this was 15 years ago, those little brick footprint houses were going for $475,000 then.
Yeah, right.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that. A house that nobody wants at a price nobody can afford. Perfect. This, of course, Ant, brings us to the foolishness of the week, and we've got a call back. Do you remember a couple of weeks, a month ago, when I said that Donald Trump had only gone to 2 of his daily intelligence briefings?
Yeah, right.
Tulsi Gabbard is working on a solution to that problem, given, of course, that that's her job. And let me ask, how would you fix that problem?
I don't know. I mean, he's the president, right? He could do what he wants.
And he's going to do what he wants. He's proven that repeatedly. So you got to find a way to make him want to do it, which seems impossible, except I think Tulsi Gabbard might be a genius, because what she's decided is to present the daily briefing to President Trump in the form of a Fox TV show.
How about that?
How smart is that?
Okay.
But my God, if we've come to this is the foolishness of the decade. I guess I say that once every 3 years, so I have to reassess. But my God, have we gotten here that a president of the United States requires some sort of dog and pony show to go to his daily intelligence briefing? You might recall, Ant, that we have war now in the Middle East, in Africa, and in Ukraine that is so bad that more people are dying of violence now than have in years. That level has just ticked up and up and up and up, and now we can't say the world is the safest it's ever been anymore. The world is almost as safe as it's ever been, even with these hotspots, but it's not as safe as it's ever been.
Right.
And that's incredibly sad and very telling. So here we are.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers.
I have it on good authority that you're going to lighten everybody's mood.
Well, everyone except yours.
Could this possibly be true? What could you possibly want to talk about that will make everybody happy? Because it made them all happy once before over my objections.
They're going to feel your blood pressure rising over the audio.
I already have a headache in my eye.
A couple of years ago, I said to James, we should do an episode on property rights on the moon. And James would have nothing to do with it. And finally, I badgered him enough that we did the episode, and actually ended up being rather popular. And I want to revisit the topic.
Because of course you do. Of course you do. How could you want anything else? Well, okay, Ant, given that there is still a moon, there is still an Earth, we don't go to the moon often. Nobody lives there, and there is absolutely no reason for property rights in a place where nobody lives. What the hell are you talking about?
All right, let me tee up the conversation for those who didn't hear the previous episode. Here's my claim. We've got a tremendous resource orbiting up there, the moon. What is there? I haven't the foggiest idea. You could imagine all kinds of things, from minerals to the vacuum to lower gravity, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Let them and entrepreneurs figure it out. But I can tell you it's a resource. Now, what's required to figure out how to leverage that resource, how to do something with it? I claim what's required is property rights. Because until you have property rights, no entrepreneur, no investor is going to take the risk, put the money on the line to go and figure out what to do with this thing. And so I claim, and we went over this in the previous episode, that one of the best ways we can leverage this resource is to assign the property rights. Now, that creates a problem because typically people turn to government and say, well, the government should own it or sell it off or whatever, or hand it out. I don't think we need to do any of that. I think we can completely bypass governments. In fact, not only can we do it, but governments run so slowly, given that we'd be using technology to do it. It would be done and accepted long before governments could ever formulate any kind of response. And here's what we said in the last episode, that we could take the moon, which I believe is roughly, and it's coincidentally, 8 billion acres, and randomly assign 1 acre to each person on the planet. That's your acre. Now, what do you do with it, right? Beats me, but it's yours. So somebody's going to turn around and say, hey, I'll buy it from you.
I could go down to many neighborhoods that I know well and buy lots and lots and lots of acres for about $10 to $20 a piece.
Oh, yeah. Look, people think back to the early days of Bitcoin and they say, boy, I wish that I had the presence of mind way back in the 1990s to buy Bitcoin when you could buy 100 of them for a penny, right?
I wish I'd heard about it back then.
Yeah. There was that story about the early guys with Bitcoin buying a pizza for like 1,000 Bitcoin, or I don't know, some ridiculous thing, right? Most expensive pizza on the planet.
$1 billion pizza.
Yeah, here's your opportunity.
Well, come on, man. Come on. Let's take a deep breath. This is your opportunity if and only if people want it.
No, it's even better if people don't want it. If people don't want it, I can buy up all sorts of acres for pennies on the dollar.
And that's worth it if and only if there's any actual value.
Right. Yes, that is correct.
In owning a plot on the moon.
But notice what happens. All of a sudden, because it's possible to buy it, you get entrepreneurs and investors thinking to themselves, what would I do if I had 1 million acres on the moon?
Yeah. All right, a fair question. So why are we talking about this nonsense again?
Well, we're talking about it because when we discussed it last time, we pointed out that the Achilles heel in the whole plan was, how do you assign an acre to a person? I mean, we've got the ability to identify each acre using GPS and all that nonsense, right? So we can identify the acres, that's no problem, but how do you attach this acre to that person? And believe it or not, I think Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, the ChatGPT people, has solved that problem.
Do tell.
Sam has launched a program by which he's looking to be able to identify individuals on the blockchain. And he's doing this by taking a photograph of your eye, and I guess it has something to do with the retina, and encoding this.
Hold on. Now I've got questions all of a sudden. Do we all have unique eyes?
That's my understanding, like fingerprints.
So we have unique eyes, unique fingerprints. You know what else is completely unique from person to person? You're never going to believe this.
What?
The anus.
James, why? Why do you have to do this?
I'm not doing anything. That's a scientific fact. It could have blown me over with a feather when I learned this.
Okay, I could have gone all day without hearing that. But let me go back to...
But it's true. There
are lots of things that are true that I don't need to hear.
It's not like our intestines are somehow unique. I mean, DNA is the gold standard, I would think, in uniqueness. Why aren't we using that?
Well, because that requires getting a sample of blood or saliva or something, and then there's a whole bunch of scientific stuff. This requires only a photograph. You take a photograph of your eye, and I think actually what he's done is he's offered people money. I forget what it is. $20 sticks in my head, but I may be wrong about that. He's offering people money if you take a photograph of your eye that can then be put onto the blockchain. And the idea is, my understanding, is that we would then be able, for example, to enter a contract, which you can do already. You can enter a contract, it can be recorded on the blockchain, but we would be able to identify specifically, it was you, it was me, by taking a photograph of the retina, because that's already recorded somewhere. So it's like having your fingerprint on file on the blockchain. His stated goal, get everybody on the planet identified on the blockchain.
All right, so two things. First, given that I never believe anything you say, I went and looked it up. And yes, in fact, eyes are unique, so much so that even your eyes and my eyes, our left and our right, are different.
Really?
How about that?
Yeah.
The only open question I would have is what about identical twins and things like that? But that's such a minority that who cares?
Yeah, I don't know. But what fascinated me when I heard this is that Sam has a problem, and unbeknownst to Sam, he is the solution to our problem.
Well, hang on, because the second thing I wanted to talk about is that if we can't get human beings here on Earth to shut up about obvious things like genetically modified foods, I don't know, vaccines, what do you think they're all going to say about collecting pictures of their eyes for this database?
oh, I think it's easy. You say, look, like he's doing now, it's completely voluntary. He's offering $20. I'm saying offer an acre on the moon. It's not going to cost him a thing as opposed to the $20. And you then solve our problem, which is there's now a way to assign an acre of the moon to each person. Now, your question, what do you do about the people that say, well, forget it. This is, conspiracy. The government's trying to get my retina, whatever. Fine. Don't do it then.
Don't.
Give people a period of time. Give them 2 years. You got 2 years to decide this. If you decide not to, hey, your acre gets randomly sent to somebody else.
Yeah, maybe we could have some sort of lottery where you could get a second acre.
Sure.
Because of all the people who didn't bother. It is interesting, isn't it? Because no matter what problem I see, the solution is baked into the proposition. It's already there.
Right.
I think this means that the only criticism that I could possibly have at the end of the day, who gets the right to assign?
Yeah. That's interesting because that leads to my next thing, which is how do we know the governments are going to honor this? I think we can solve both of those problems with this same thing. If the assignment is completely transparent, you're being assigned perfectly randomly, and I don't know how you do the transparency, but people who deal in blockchain have figured this out already. Make it transparent so everybody is comfortable that the game is not rigged. Then you're going to have more people looking to sign on to it. This solves the second question of how do you get the governments to honor this? All you got to do is get enough people behind it. Imagine in this country, what would happen if you had, pick a number, 50 million Americans who were told they own an acre on the moon. In fact, they could tell you which acre it is. And all of a sudden the government comes along and says, no, we don't think so. Yeah, that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly at all.
Not at the numbers that you're suggesting.
Right.
Right. At the numbers you're suggesting, people are going to be irked if the government does something untoward. And the government will, because that's what governments do. But you didn't answer the first question. Who gets to decide? Who gets to set up the randomizer? There's always a first mover here. How do we determine who gets to be that first mover?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but there are ways to set up randomization that is transparent, that everybody can point to and say, yeah, indeed, this is truly random.
And here I am about to just jump on this foolishness full square because I've already figured out how to make millions of dollars on this the minute it comes into being. And it has nothing to do with the real estate on the moon. It has everything to do with taking pictures of the moon for people. Here's your acre.
Oh, right. Yeah. Right.
Right. I want to be the Levi Strauss of the moon movement. Right. And for those of you out there who don't know why Levi Strauss is such a big deal, he made more, I think, over time, given the company that still exists with his name on it. But even at the time, he made more than all the gold rush participants combined.
Yeah.
Most people ran to California to find gold and found nothing. But they bought all their gear from Levi Strauss.
Yeah, he wasn't looking for gold. He was just providing them with pants.
That's right. Pants and pans, right? All the things that you need. Essentially, he was running tax stores, and you could buy anything you needed from Levi Strauss. And he was the big gold rush winner, not the people who came home with all the gold. And that's something. It fundamentally changed the way that I try to make a living.
Yeah.
It always has. All right, this is getting interesting. Even I am finding ways to manipulate this.
I know. I'm very surprised that you find it interesting. But let me underline a couple of other things. One, there will be a huge sense of equality here, right? Not only are we doing an end run around the governments here, heck with them, we're going to figure this out ourselves. We're also making an end run around the rich people, right? We're taking the entire planet, whoever's alive as of today, each of them gets 1 acre. It's perfectly equitable.
Yeah, it's not, though. There's a gigantic problem that you have not stopped to think about, and that's that there is a dark side of the moon.
Yeah, but it's not dark in the sense of being dark. We call it that. You just don't see it from Earth. It's on the other side.
Yeah, is that going to cause a problem?
No?
I think those spots might be less valuable.
They might be simply, if for no other reason, then you could point to this spot. I could get a big telescope and look at my acre, right? You can't do that from the other side.
I can't take a picture of anything on the dark side of the moon and hand it out to people who pay me money to do it.
Ah, but you can, because there are pictures. There are high-resolution pictures of the backside of the
So
moon.
we might be able to do
Yeah.
some work on that.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see an obvious problem besides the fact that the moon is far away. We can't get there. There seems to be no reason we would ever get there anytime soon. And this doesn't exactly answer my question of who gets the rights to chop it up. Because there could always be alien races that don't agree with us.
Yeah, I can't help you there. That's
Yeah.
completely beyond me. But here's the thing. It avoids all of the problems. Because, look, you know this is coming. There's going to come a point, probably in the next generation, where we're seriously sending people to the moon, and they're going to be there for semi-permanently. There are stations there, the whole thing. The question of ownership is going to come up. Let's deal with it now while it's very clean before anybody's there. You absolutely do not want the Chinese and the Indians and the Americans to all have bases up there, and then we start to talk about who owns the moon.
Ah, right. But now you see one of the problems, because you want to give property rights on the moon to individuals, and governments are still going to build bases.
Well, are they?
Yes.
Are they? Because
They are.
picture a world in which, and let's be conservative here, let's suppose 20% of the people on the earth sign up for this thing, and they're scattered throughout all the countries. You've got 20% of humanity with a vested interest in telling the governments to get off their property.
Yeah, and no means by which to do that.
Well, maybe.
No obvious means of doing
Well,
that.
I think it depends on where you are. If you're in China, you may have no obvious means. If you're in the United States, all of a sudden there's a race amongst the politicians. Elect me, and I'll ensure that the government respects your property rights.
Yeah, careful there. I think what you're much more likely to find is a politician, I don't know, one with an orange hue, per se, who says the Chinese have the upper hand. We're going to have to take all your moon space away. Because, the Chinese.
Oh, a politician may say that, but then you've got 300 million Americans saying, my larger problem is not that. My larger problem is the IRS saying, oh, look, you just got an acre of land on the moon. You owe taxes.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because there would be no obvious way to tax that until it becomes a capital gain. Right, on the federal level, and I don't think that my locality or my state is going to get into taxing me on my moon holdings.
No, what they'll do is, at least initially, is they'll tax it like they tax Bitcoin. If you sell it at a profit, you're going to owe capital gains tax.
I think ultimately that's correct.
Let me refer listeners to something in economics we call dead capital. And this is a phenomenon that you see a lot of in Africa, where people own something. So you're in a village and you own a plot of land, maybe you own a house that's on it, what have you. And we refer to it as dead capital because although you own it, you cannot use it as leverage. You cannot go to a bank and say, give me a loan using this land and this building as collateral so that I can do whatever, pay for education, start a business.
I might point out that if that's true, you don't own it.
Well, see, that's the weird thing. You ask anybody in the village who owns that house, who owns the property, they'll say, well, it's James. James owns it. The problem is there's no record that you can take to a bank as an objective piece of evidence and say, I own this thing. And if you can't do that, the bank can't regard it as collateral. Hence, it's dead capital. We've got an entire planetary body that right now is dead capital. This would solve that problem. It would enable people to leverage, to invest. They would have the possibility of some return. All of a sudden, that capital becomes alive.
Interesting. Very interesting. So I'm going to say a thing that I can't believe I'm going to say. We should get back to this. This is interesting. There are things here that are very fascinating. And even as a thought experiment, it's interesting. But it might be interesting in the real world, even if the real world includes the moon now.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting, James? We had this conversation. It was probably 2, maybe 3 years ago.
2 years, maybe 3 years ago. That's about right.
And it was at the time we said this is an interesting thing, but it's fatal flaws. How do you match the people with the thing? But here it's just been 2 years, and that problem's been solved.
Yeah, we should get in touch with this guy.
Sam Altman, yeah. Anybody who's listening, if you know anybody who works for or with Sam Altman, send him a copy of this episode.
Yeah, because we may not be able to reach him ourselves. Just saying. Just saying. I don't know. Look, I'm becoming more sold with each passing moment on this, right? And with moments, I go back to the time before that first episode until today. You're kind of selling me on this. I'm kind of buying this. So we'll see if I ever own a portion of the moon.
And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time,
Send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.